also, sorry for yelling before. I'm kind of nervous.
Oh, that reminds me though, because of everything, just like to take this time, thank you guys for your patience and apologize for you guys to just calm down a little and take your time in composing yourselves. On the motion that this House would retrospectively criminalize excessively risky management practices for economically significant corporations and prosecute the executives responsible for them, we invite the Prime Minister to speak for the motion that stands in her name. Hear, hear.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, as a government today, we prefer a world where at least some people are held accountability for the healthy growth of our economy. And we regret the power asymmetry that exists between the high management officials and the normal investors who give their entire life, entire life, their money into certain industrials, but lost their money, but have no explanation. We think what we are doing in the status quo is to solve the power asymmetry existing and to add some checks balance to push these officials to make some rational and reasonable decisions. So, model first. What are we doing is simple. We're creating an independent, state-authorized organization to look through the protocols of these big companies that are either state-owned or have a very significant contribution to our economies, probably some investment banks, probably some energy companies, all kind of these companies. We're going to look through the profile by look through their confidential protocols, like in their conferences and decision-making process, and to decide and by these experts whether their decisions is risky, excessively risky. So by saying excessively risky, we mean decisions that is obvious overspending, over-investment, or over-leverage, which means borrowing too much money when when the company does not have the capability to run such amount of capitals. This is the model. So,
clarification?
yes?
If you implement the policy today, would you punish acts that were committed in the past?
Well, by saying retrospectively, we mean that we punish both the decisions that already have a consequence and the decisions that have a potential to lead to harmful consequences. So what is the status quo that we recognize?
Point of clarification.
Sorry. We think we're living in a world where the economy is based on investment and capitals, where normal people contribute to economy by giving some of the money or a large part of the money in order to want to get something back. However, we think the power is too much submitted to a certain amount of people, especially the management officials of these companies. We think their decisions have a huge impact on the economy, but they do not have a checks and balance to control their decisions. And we see in a lot of cases during the financial crisis, several people make decisions while the rest of the company unaware of what their company is actually doing in that day. That is a risky thing that we're talking about today. And also within state, the government does not have checks and balances to intervene with these decisions because the government can have nothing to do but to intervene afterwards instead of involving in the decision-making process. Given that we're living in a free market competition, we think this is a perfect way for the government to intervene in order to give much deterrence to these big companies. So I'm going to prove two things to you. The first of all, why it is justified to prosecute these officials based on the risky decisions. And secondly, why will this policy lead to a healthier economy and make the society better off? So we think that when these officials are making decisions, they are very likely to take a risk instead of avoiding risk. Why do we say so? We think because they know that the benefit of a decision will benefit them more, while the consequence of their decisions will not affect that much more. If you look at the financial crisis, we say that the financial crisis is led by a lot of big companies, not he solely. That is why the officials have a look mind that he can avoid punishment by taking this risk because it is not he solely doing this. There's a lot of others, and this impact is collective. That is why we say that he does not have an impact to take reasonable decisions instead of risky decisions that will bring them to huge and enormous profits, potentially. So that is why we think they have incentive to do that, and they are really aware of that. But because in the status quo, we do not have any punishment to punish them, even if after the financial crisis we indeed punish some of them. But we think that punishment is not enough and it's not proportional because given what they did, the state has not got enough power to punish them based on their very dispersed decisions. That is why we say that they have an incentive to do that, and they are aware of the risk, but they do not do that because they are the ones who benefited most. They benefited most from their decisions. And we also see in the status quo that some accounting firms incorporate and make conspiracy with these big companies and to avoid to support them with their risky decisions. And that is something we want to avoid as well in the status quo. So why it is justified? Because we think the government is representing the ordinary people. While the ordinary people put their whole life into one single industry, they are unaware of what the management officials are doing. We think there should be some people thinking about these ordinary people because what they lost is their entire life, and what I think the consequence of the decisions unproportionately impact these ordinary and normal families. That is why we think the state here has a perfect position to represent these people and to avoid such tragedies from happening. So second of all, why we think it will lead to a healthy economy and have everybody better off? It is simple, because we're adding a deterrence to these company officials. While they are making decisions, they will avoid taking excessive risks and instead have a more rational and reasonable stance over their decisions because they are afraid of being punishment. We also recognize that the state has not, in that case, over-intervened with their decisions because the state has an incentive to keep the economy from progressively improving. That's why we think the state will also support their reasonable and progressive investment decisions. And that is why we think in that case, avoiding excessive risky decisions while also keep some progressive ones will make our whole economy better off. So based on all this, to stand with the ordinary people, we're proud to propose.
Ladies and gentlemen, so far, team government have not met their burden of proof of showing why we should criminalize and take such a drastic measure against the free market and why this will lead to any benefits, because they have not actually proved to us what the particular harms are. And we will be taking a stand on this debate and showing how the free market works and how we trust in it. Secondly, how this specific measure harms the economy and the society and goes against the principle of not having retroactive legal criminal laws. And my partner Saddiq will talk about how there are very many big immense harms of punishing executives. But before I do that, please allow me to engage in some responses based on what they have already brought up. So first of all, concerning the model, we have a lot of issues with the model, and we think that a lot is left unanswered. First of all, independent organization is really vague and unclear. We want some more actual examples of what it would be like and why it would be impartial and actually want to work and for the best. So secondly, this is another unclear phrase, which is obvious overspending. We not really understand that phrase. We want them to contextualize what over and excessive actually means in real economic terms, because we think that in the free market risks do take place, and we want to have risk because they can lead to progress. So what they say as excessive, we don't really understand what they mean. And thirdly, we'll not see who those executives are that they would punish and why they would punish executives. And I will attack on their justification in a while. And finally, we have an issue with the concept of retrospectively punishing people. So in the legal system, we basically do not punish people for actions that they did not know were punishable at the time, because we believe that this leads to instability, and that leads to people not being able to prevent the consequences of their actions. And we not want that instability. We not want people to do things now and then in some years to tell them, hello, what you did was wrong. We want them to know at the time they commit their action, whether what they do is right or wrong. And through their model, this completely is disregarded. So now moving on to their constructive case and how they justify punishing officials. They say that, well, they obviously take risk, and we believe that this is an assertion because what we think takes place in the real world, in the real free market, is a risk assessment. So we weigh the benefits and the losses, and we believe that those people in power, no thank you, will make the decision based on that risk assessment. So we not believe in the assertion that inherently they take risks. No, we believe that they take risks when they think that it is in their interest and in the interest of the general public, because their corporations are interested in what the general public does. And we do not believe that the shareholders of the company are stupid. They will not put stupid people in charge of the company. So we disagree with the assumption that officials take harmful risks. No, thank you. And finally, what they talked about how we want to protect normal investors. And what we respond to that is that, first of all, it remains their responsibility what they do with their money. So if they give it to someone who is obviously and stupidly excessive in the risk-taking, well, we would allocate some of the responsibility of losing their money to themselves. And even if the corporation is not obviously excessive in the risk-taking, no thank you, we believe that when the normal investors lose, then the corporation loses as well. So what we have on their case is no proof of why they have a criminal responsibility. When a corporation loses, the normal investor loses too. That's how the free market works. We do not see how this basic fact of human life, establishes criminal responsibility, and it was their burden to prove that we should criminalize and prosecute those people. And I will be moving on to our stand on the debate and explaining, no thank you, why the free market works. So we believe that the free market is in a unique position to self-regulate itself, and that makes their model redundant and, what is more, harmful. So how and why does the free market regulate itself? We believe that the market is in a place to acclimate and adapt itself based on what goes on around it, because it is an interaction. There are many people in place who take into account what the general public does, how the economy works, and we believe that this risk assessment process, which is based on the motivation of profit that corporations have, will make the risk assessment better. So we trust in the free market with doing whatever they think is best. Not in a moment, madam, to not make stupid and excessively risky behavior. So, because of that self-regulation of the market, and because of the motivation of profit that is really strong in the corporations, we believe that it is in their interest not to make stupid business decisions and to have the general public, because it is in the interest of the companies to have the general public on the side. When the people lose, or when the people don't like the company, then the company loses as well. Yes, madam.
Ma'am, the executives are aware that if bad consequences happen, someone will be punished, but they still take risks because they know that they are not directly liable for that.
First of all, you have not actually explained to us why risks are inherently bad, and we have told you, we have responded that there is a self-regulation process, that if a person in power makes an incredibly stupid and harmful decision, then the shareholders will be disappointed and will probably fire that person, and overall the free market will self-regulate itself, will acclimate itself to everything that takes place. And this is exactly because if they see that something really bad, that an economic collapse takes place, then they'll have a greater motivation not to repeat that in the future. When they see that something they did, it was riskful and harmful, they will not repeat that. We trust in the free market to regulate itself because they have the motivation of profit. And now let's see why this motion specifically harms society and the economy. First of all, because it creates changes of policy of risk assessment, and that does not mean it makes it better. It makes it worse because it creates fear, and fear is a disincentive. We do not want people to be too safe in their economic decisions. We believe that risk taking is not inherently bad. We think that some risk is necessary for the economy to progress, and we want not to do away that progress and that change. But what is more, we do not want to get the message across that companies are inherently bad, and that is what they do. They get the message to the society that every decision the company makes is bad, and not only that, is retroactively bad, and that is vindictive, ladies and gentlemen. And we not want companies to go underground in order to maintain a good image. We not want to play entirely safe either. We want them to be able to take risks and not get punished for business decisions they did not know were wrong at the time. So for all these reasons, we beg to oppose. Thank you.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, as our government side, we're going to prove to you, first of all, that they're given the examples of financial crisis and all the crises that we see. First of all, we see that the free market mechanism has its problems, and from a very historical view, we've always seen that government is adding regulations to that, and we will prove to you why this policy is the same as any other regulation that we're going to add in order to have a more fair playground for the free market, for a healthier mechanism. And second of all, we're going to tell you why the risky management, even in retrospectively view, they are bad, and they are equally bad as having all those concrete consequences. And therefore, we think they should also be held responsible for their excessively risky management. And before that, several rebuttals. First of all, we say that we agree that not all risks are bad. However, we say that for all those executives in high positions, what they are doing is that they are doing. They're making decisions that they can foresee with a concrete damage. For example, when we see that the head of investment banking, Barclays, which was a very powerful investment banking before the financial crisis, what they're doing is they're borrowing money from another firm in order to invest in other areas, and so that they can have a very perfect and very good asset and liability form that they can present to all those people in the stock market. So see that what they're doing is actually they know that there will be foreseeable damages in the future. However, they still do that because they are actually in the interest of those shareholders. Who are in very different position with all those people. And so we think that when we see that there are foreseeable damages excessively risky that can actually be avoided on our current model, we see that why not doing so? And secondly, we see that we see that first of all, we see that there are problems in the free market that the government is lacking regulations, because we see that not all those management problems is actually exposed to sunlight. So we see that the people in the management layers, they are the people who actually know what is happening. They are the people who know what problems are going to happen. So I think that in the current status quo, when we see the government is actually in a weaker position to detecting all those problems, what we can do by passing this policy is to adding more burden and deterrence to these people for them to make more rational choices. So I think that given the status quo, the government is already in a weaker position of detecting all those things. We think that by passing this policy, we're going to add deterrence, and this is the thing that is related to their self-interest. So this is the thing that will actually push them to make rational choice, to make more rational decisions. And then the aspects about or models about. When we say that we can actually have an audit committee that will look through, for example, the cases that we have for example, in the past, in financial crisis, and see that what other companies at that time have excessively risky management methods, and then we're gonna criminalize them. And then, yes, what's your point? Opening.
Okay, right. So if you have a person in an investment in a bank giving a risky loan to another person to buy a house, does the regional director of that bank, is he criminalized, or is the CEO of the bank as a whole?
First of all, we see that this is not the case we're talking about. We're talking about companies with significantly economical impact of this country. That is to say that they have a very significant role in our society. That is to say, if they, for example, go bankrupt, our whole economy is gonna be influenced. And we see this is the case that we're talking about. And then I'm gonna prove to you why those risky management, they're actually equally bad as having all those concrete consequences that we see nowadays. For example, if we see all those crises, they're not a result of a single issue. They are actually the result of so many invisible bombs that will that will explode at any time that we see in our economy. So I think that it is invisible crisis that is unknown to the public, but known to all those CFOs and CEOs. That is actually the concrete harm that we will see in our today's economy. So I think that, for example, what we see is a real estate bubble. However, what we do not know as a government and as all those people is what is actually going on with our risk management. So I think that what we do right now is that we're telling them if there's concrete harm that we will see in the future, you should be held accountable for what you're doing right now. So I think this is where the deterrence power comes in. No, thank you. So I think that when we see that there are, if we see that there are actually treating all those, so we see that when they're actually playing with all those loopholes in our society, instead of actually filling those loopholes, and what we're seeing is that they are actually treating all those people who are in a weaker position as test animals for all their risky management. We think that they have the ability to actually consult all those people, to consult within their firms to make a more rational decision. We think that for them, it's actually a quite easy decision, a quite easy step to make a more rational decision, given that they have all those algorithms that they can count on. So I think that, no, thank you. So
So I think that given that we think that all those risky management, given that what we as a government will do is that giving them a deterrence and telling them that by doing all those risky management that have a foreseeable damage in the first place, you'll be held accountable in the future. So then this is the very direct burden that will put to all those CFOs and CEOs and telling them that you should be held accountable for your decisions. And second of all, we tell you that in our current status quo, we have seen government actively engaging in the process of free market. And we see that as long as market-free competition exists, companies will still try to seek out all those management methods. For example, we see like the lean concept of the Japanese industry. This is a management method. However, we do not see that this is a method that is risky. So I think that that the company is in a very good position to weigh all those risks and and we think that they are in the ability to do so, and they're in the best position to do so. And therefore, we are very proud to propose for an economy with lesser risk, but still have innovations because we're not actually harming the free market. Therefore, we are proud to propose. Thank you.
Everybody hears me? Okay, great. 1 second. Madam Chair, adjudicators, today's side proposition in their case have fundamentally misunderstood both the case that we made about how the market self-regulates and the actual way that the market exists in our society, right? They basically kept on talking about how the market, the shareholders and the people who invest in companies and the rest of society are three things that have absolutely nothing to do with each other and are actually harmful for each other. We entirely disagree with that narrative. We believe that the free market's working bases itself on how the people view the companies themselves. It bases itself on how the shareholders view the company, if they're going to give their money to a company or not, and that the risk assessment and if the person in charge of the company is insane or not is something that plays a significant role in that. Okay, today Maria talked to you a bit about the free market and a bit about direct harms we derive from the motion. I'm going to talk to you on a specific note about even if all the harms that we outlined don't exist, there's still an inherent harm in punishing executives in this case. No, thank you. But before we do this, let's talk a bit about rebuttal. First of all, we still have kind of issues with the model, right? Because in the point of information where I asked if a person in a regional bank makes a bad choice or risky assessment, is the regional bank's head punished or is the CEO of the whole company punished? The answer we got was that we're only talking about large companies, which is exactly the case, ladies and gentlemen. And it's even more exactly the case when they continued on to talk about the financial crisis, about bubbles, and about this kind of invisible crisis. Because we believe that that kind of thing is what is produced on a grassroots level, ladies and gentlemen. It might be a person in a regional bank insinuating that you might need to give a bit more loans freely. Why does this directly link, no thank you, with the CEO or the person that they haven't talked about that will actually be punishing? We haven't seen that link. We would like to see it. No thank you. Right. Moving on, let's talk a bit about their justification for why we punish these officials. They talked a bit about how these officials obviously always take risks. I think we kind of answered that in Maria's speech, that they take benefit in the risk assessment as well, and second of all, that this risk has an assessment of how good the company is going to act, ladies and gentlemen. Because if a company acts in a way that is too risky, that the risks obviously outweigh the benefits, in this case it is punished by its dropping shares or by shareholders leaving or by the company not selling enough to the general public, because in the status quo the public eventually finds out about this, ladies and gentlemen. No thank you. And in that case, the profit as an incentive is clearly against making insane and risky decisions, right? Okay, another point, no thank you, they talked about is about the economy and society and all these kind of things, and how the state now is going to support reasonable actions. What we say is here that in this case, maybe those actions will be too reasonable, right? If an executive, in this case, no thank you, if an executive is called upon to make a reasonable action or to be entirely punished, only he being punished if he takes a wrong action, we see this as an overwhelming pressure to take less risks than they would take otherwise, even in correct risk calculation, ladies and gentlemen. So it won't result in a beneficial risk calculation, it'll result in one that is skewed towards being safe, and that is not always the good thing to have in an economy. No thank you. But the other very damaging thing that this does, and it's actually in response to the invisible crisis point we said, is that in these cases this creates an incentive to make more decisions under the table, right? Because if this kind of decisions that are risky are so beneficial, as you said, no thank you, they won't just give up on them, they'll just start to do them more underground, to have less clear decisions, to have shareholders have less information, and society have less information. They're making the companies take the same decisions, if not worse decisions, but are forcing them underground. No thank you. And on the last point that they talked about is that the reasoning behind this is that if you take an action right now that is bad in the future, you should inherently be punished. The problem here is retrospectively, right? Because we're saying that a person who made a decision that could, at worst, no thank you, have massive implications for his company, now we're saying that that risk calculation in the current time is something illegal and you'll be punished for it. At the point that the person made the risk calculation, his personal freedom, because we are talking probably about people going to jail, his personal freedom is at stake. The problem here is that having this kind of vindictive justice means that people are punished for actions they didn't know were illegal. Sure. Closing.
We think it is okay to have risk, but based on the national forecast, not too excessive like what these companies want.
Could you repeat that point, please?
It is okay to have the risk based on the forecast of company, but not too risk.
All right, fantastic. What we say to this is that in the status quo, what I responded a bit earlier, is that in the risk assessment of the company, under your measure, the harm is that that kind of risk assessment becomes way too safe. That's my answer to that point. Great. Okay. Yep. So let's move on to our constructive case about the inherent harms of punishing executives in this case. Again, even all the harm that we clearly outlined to the free market, to the workings of the economy that Maria talked about, don't exist, we still see that there is a harm in punishing the executive. Why? Alright, let's take a look at the power structure of a company. The structure is not entirely linear, right? It doesn't stem from a single executive down to other people that basically carry forth his enlightened rule. We see that we have kind of sister locations, we have branches, we have different multinationals in different places, right? So in the end, that person, it's almost impossible that he knows everything that's going on, right? And even if he has that burden, many times risky business is based on the small fry of a company, as I outlined, I think now 3 times in the example that I gave. So in this case, the problem comes from criminal responsibility, right? Because even if we accept that this person does have a sort of burden, which we surely do not, we see that we need a clear and concise link before we send someone to jail. In this case, because of the structure of multinational corporations, what actually happens is that these kind of command decisions are made in a more, let's say, safe way, which is bad both for the executives and for the people. Ladies and gentlemen, their motion doesn't prove criminal responsibility. Their side creates a world where both the investors and high management and society lose. Team NTU Athens is so proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank the Deputy Leader for that speech. To open the closing half of this debate and the closing government case, we
as a closing government, we don't want to repeat the financial crisis. We want more stable economy for today's and for futures, ladies and gentlemen. We don't ban them and companies to take the risk, but what they need to learn is which is plausible risk should be taken and which excessively risk that should not worth taking by the company, ladies and gentlemen. We are happy to find the company that not follow the order, and we also happy to punish the executive by put them in the jail and also give them monetary fine. But this is not even the core of the debate. The core of the debate that needs to be answered is why government need to take an extensive stance in terms of regulating economic and regulating the company's behaviors in order not to taking the in order not to create the repetitions of financial crisis. Because what you need to understand, in maybe 80s or 90s, USA gone into the financial crisis because the behaviors of bankers and also behaviors on the stock control market, for examples. And in the 2008, we have the case of Rahman brothers that pretty much similar in terms of behavior and people taking the excessive risk without control, ladies and gentlemen. This is what the slippery slope of the argument that there is no rules in the previous, and this is why they still operate anyway, even though we still have the debate whether the bank should go too big or not, because when you go too big, it goes too big to fail, ladies and gentlemen. This is why we should take into account when this is assessment of the government should take place, ladies and gentlemen. We also understand later, company have their own risk assessment, but this is the thing that never been characterized by the opposition bench, because we believe they are maybe not careless, but they're not always right, ladies and gentlemen, because companies' assessment can be biased under two scenarios. First, they are overwhelmed by the profit of margins, that this is how they operate because they are too capitalism or they are too profit oriented. And second is the bias or from the idealist or ego of this executive, that sometimes they neglect the statistic assessment that consultants say no, but they still goes on that level. But most importantly, for example, executive in the case of mortgage, they will always push the banker in terms of target of income. This is why they also always operate in that level, ladies and gentlemen. This is why the fault is not only in the company level, but also in the executive level. Yes, opening.
Okay, right. Doesn't the fact that these kind of executives can be fired or that Lehman Brothers is currently considered the actual devil punishment enough for bad business practice?
I will explain that in my second contentions. But firstly, why company can be, why the initial goals of the government is to create careful management practices that should be conned by the companies, ladies and gentlemen. Because what we want is not only holding companies' liability in the today's situation, but in the futures. Because when you go into the company's practices, there will always risk that might occur in the futures, and this is what as a government we want to have controls upon that, ladies and gentlemen, because in the sense of common sense, we know that it is not okay, but we think that the calculus of companies never calculate until that level, ladies and gentlemen, because they always compromising into today's benefit only compared toward the futures harm or futures damage, ladies and gentlemen. Exactly like they say, we are living in the free market situation, ladies and gentlemen, where all economy are integrated, when today's situation of economy and the future situation of economy also being integrated, ladies and gentlemen. That's why you need to careful in the today's and the futures. We want to shaping behavior of them, that even though today we have no law, we still can prosecute you in the futures. That's why you need to careful upon your decisions making, ladies and gentlemen. It is very intuitive to make people understand upon this. This is why the process to regulate company will even better. But not only that, it will create a better risk management, because company will tend to go to not only single internal audit, for example, or risk management. Since government will hold you liable, we will create a second tier or a second safety net of audit, for example. They will also cooperate with the independent or even government consultants to prevent the futures harm in economy, to prevent futures bankruptcy, for example. That's why they will not be egoistic, because they will care upon that, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, we will talk upon the risky investment, like what happened in the too big to fail in terms of bank, ladies and gentlemen. We don't want this to be happens, but let's talk about fairness, because what happened in the 2008 crisis, government should bear the very huge burden to giving the bailout to the companies, but at the end, the executive that creates such a risk and such a damage can free, ladies and gentlemen, and it is very unfair because they are the one that who carelessly done that. In this, under our mechanism, what we create is at least we should sharing the burden in the today's damage that come into previous decisions of Rahman brother, for examples. Not only government that should take care upon the damage, but also the companies, but also the executive should hold liable upon the damage. This is why maybe if we can implement this in the previous time, the recovery of economy will be better, ladies and gentlemen, because you don't only have the resource from the governments, but also from the companies as well, ladies and gentlemen. This is why the integrated of recovery will be better. Lastly, what harm will goes if we don't criminalize them? This is why we think that what happened is very huge, ladies and gentlemen, because in the free market, developed country and developing countries also go being integrated, ladies and gentlemen, and the spectrum of damage are wider, and this is why we need to habituate the companies to go as well in the good behaviors of decisions. This is why it will also harm the companies in terms of supply chain line, because the supplier or also the contractor of the mortgage in Rahman brother will get the harm as well, but in today's situations they have none to rely on. This is why in the proposal coming from the government, as at least peoples that got harm in the supply chain line can also ask the responsibility and some part of compensation from the peoples that can be held liable, not only to government, because the burden are too big for if you only care upon government, ladies and gentlemen. This is why government is the best actor to create these calculations, because government care toward the wider spectrum as well, and this is good for economy. It goes to the closing government.
At the very beginning, I just wanted to say that I'm very happy to be here, because that's my first break. So happy to be here. Thank you.
We thank the government member for her speech. To open the case for the closing opposition, to invite the opposition member.
Dear panel, we believe that the model proposed by the government won't prevent the real harm. Why? Because that companies still gain the profits, so it has a strong incentive to try to obey the law, and not to obey the law, or try to find other ways to cheat on those regulations. And secondly, we believe that even if they don't receive profits, but they, for example, they have a great harm, then we need as a society subsidize them. So actually, the real harm still exists. That's what we believe. And what is more, we believe that stable economy, what the opposition is fighting for, is only then when we have a stable law. Why? The system of law. Because if we now going to punish retroactively people who acted in the past, without knowledge that are going to be punished for their actions, those people who are living right now, they may be not going to take even risky actions, not extremely risky actions, because who knows if the law is not going to change in the future. So we will not have innovative economy, because those people will not take risky actions as well. But let me move to my substantial material. First, I'm going to tell you about that this model is going to punish wrong people because of building of proxies. Secondly, I'm going to prove that retrospective punishment is harmful both for individuals and society. And third, last but not the least, I want to tell you that retrospective criminalization will be ineffective and so harmful to the society. Let me start with punishing wrong people. Well, biggest CEOs, like for example Warren Buffett, because corporate law is so complex to allow companies to be flexible, it is actually very possible not to be in charge officially, but actually being a person who is decision-making person, right? So, for example, Warren Buffett will have an incentive to build proxies. Officially, he won't be an CEO, but actually he will possess real decisive power. So, actually, the people who we are going to punish are just the puppets. And why should they decide to be a puppet? Because, for example, a $1 million is nothing for a company who can, for example, gain a profit with millions or maybe billions of dollars. But for the family of that person is a lot of money. So the thing is that person may even take the risk to be imprisoned for, I don't know, year 2 or 3, whatever, the model that doesn't provide it, but still he will take the chance because the company will pay for that, right? For example, the company can compensate that to the family because still the profits stays in the company, because as the government proposed, only CEOs are going to be punished. So the company still has this profit, right? So this profit can, for example, be paid to the family of the person who decided to sacrifice himself. That's why we believe that is ineffective, because those decisions are going to be taken anyway by those puppets. And we also believe that the main harm is that this profit is still staying in the company, or even if the company failed to receive the profit, but is going, for example, to go bankrupt, because of the company is so extremely important to the economy, we as a society going to subsidize that company, right? So this is the main harm. So we believe that rather all stakeholders should be punished by taking the profits for the company, not only the CEO making that decision, because he not may be a decisive person, he just may be a puppet. So let me move to my second argument. It's about the retrospective punishment that is harmful both for individuals and society. Why is it so? For individuals, it's just unjust to punish that person. Why? Because if we are going to punish people who took such actions in the past, not knowing that they are going to be punished, it's against the rule of legalism, and it's against of the democracy. Why? Because democracy is governed by the rule of law. So it means, because of the most important principle of criminal law, that if something is not forbidden, and it wasn't in the past, so it's allowed. And if it's allowed, it cannot be punished. This is the most fundamental principle of legal system, of our democratic system, legalism. So we cannot punish somebody because he took actions that weren't punished, that he didn't expect that he may be punished for. And secondly, we believe that this retrospective punishment is very harmful to the society. Why is it so? Because society gains profits from growing economy. And we have greater wealth and comfort of life because of this rise in the economy. And to have the growth in the economy, we need companies to be innovative. But to be innovative, right, you need to take a risk. Sometimes it's a very great risk. So if we are not going to punish companies that took a risk and they actually contributed to the society because they succeed, so why should we punish those companies who don't actually succeed? Because we don't make an incentive for companies to take the risk later on, to actually make those innovations happen. We believe that innovations are very important, because even if there is a huge excessive risk that it's not going to be profitable, sometimes it's worth to go for that. Why? For example, JFK pharmaceutical company, right? It is a really significant company because it is on the stock, and people buy actions, etc., etc. It has a lot of money. So if this company decides, for example, to looking for a treatment for cancer, even if it's not very likely to find it, it is it is profitable for the society, right? Because even if they may lose millions or maybe billions of dollars, still, if they succeed, there's a great advantage for the society. If they don't, we shouldn't punish them because they did it for a good reason, right? The question, please.
Well, so we think underground decisions are decisions that will be punished under our paradigm as well. Even if not, we think the decisions that happening in the status quo by so limited people is already as bad as underground decisions that you are talking about.
Right. Sorry, I haven't understood the question correctly, but let me move forward. So, last but not the least, retrospective criminalization will be ineffective. Why is it so? Because economically significant companies have a lot of resources, a lot of money. Government has limited resources. So those companies will be actually more likely to take a bunch of good lawyers and to fight the government in the court. So the process will be long, will be very costly, and the government will have to incur the costs. So not only government and society has already subsidized those actions, I mean the failure of those actions, but now we have to not, for example, improve our health system, not to improve our educational system, but we have to look for the justice in the court that may be very expensive and very ineffective. And that's why we believe that there are that the cost is too significant, because you're not going to win a battle if you know that if you do that you will lose the war, right? So it's not the most important mean. What we believe is that prevention is the answer. We should rather have a prevention governmental body that will before not allowed to take certain actions. It will avoid the main harm that subsidies are. It may also avoid the punishing innocent people that I have mentioned before, and it may stop excessively risk management because for sure those actions will not be allowed. So we believe that prevention is better than retrospective punishment. That's why I'm very proud to oppose. Thank you.
We thank the opposition member for his speech. To close the government's case, we invite the government.
If you talk about company innovations, we think A, company will never be that innovation in making risk in economy, because they always try to find the same way because they want to have the fast return and also don't ignorance toward the forecast even toward the fact. But number two, even if they would want to talk about innovation, in our case will be better because you want to force them to have efficient and also effective innovation in the end of the day with lower investment. For example, if we talk about cancer medicines, right? Within in study school, government support that research. But even if in number two, we don't need so much money to begin with because there are already blueprint in terms of cancer medicines in the end of the day, right? Even if that's happened, if you talk about medication, that's predicted what the result because in experiment what medicine and etc. That's not the case, right? But the problem is that the crisis happens 2008, even most likely to happen 2007, because we need to see that the company take the same actions and the executive takes the same reasons to begin with, because they neglect the fact they want to make a fast return toward the company, right? We don't think that's beneficial toward the government because government is the only one take the burden to begin with, even take the right of people become more unemployment, even take the right of another company that do not have the same risk in the end of the day. That's what things create more domino harm in our government. Number one, let's talk about the free market. That's what we're talking about, right? If you talk about the current free market, all countries are integrated. Developing and also developed nations are integrated each other. So whatever the company made the decisions, for example, developing country the company in developing country made a decision, it will impact another company also. Moreover, we face the Trans-Pacific Partnership, like United States of America and Asia country, and also TPIP in EU and also United States of America, meaning your company decision not only impact one state, even one country, but also impact another country. Because of why? Because your decisions may harm another, may create another calculation for another company to take the same risk, ladies and gentlemen. Because if you take the same risk, another company also will take the same so because they want to fast return in the end of the day. What is result into, right? Number one, the government need to create the bailout, like what my member say to you. This is unnecessary bailout that the government need to give because this company already create many domino impact to another company. For example, company as their own supply chains that do not take a big risk. Also, another company also do not take the same risk. Also takes the same impact to this company, right? Not only that, this bailout also takes taxpayer money from society, meaning meaning it is harm the capacity of society to exercise the infrastructure, to exercise another benefit to begin with. We think that's harm. Not only that, it is create more unemployment within the state because of this company create a risk and also excessively risky, right? In that case, will not happen. This company will fine because it is not because they don't see that the harm tangible directly to them. As government, you need to responsible to the harm. Unemployment, you need to create more subsidy to our society, for example, because the high price on good, for example, also responsible by government. It is result, but it is result by the company takes the base risk in the end of the day. The problem is that we need to consider this economy as very unpredicted, right? Economy are unpredicted in the future. But the problem is that you also have your own consultant, you also have your own analysis to predict what will happen in the future, right? But this company most likely will not care because they think that the profit will be slow, even if the profit will not that high. This company will most likely go to irrational decision because they think it is going to be better for them. We think government need to create more strict control to this company to make sure this company will go to the proposals. Yes.
So why take this specific choice of criminalizing this when the money will still stay in the company? Why are you criminalizing the executive specifically in this case?
The question is still the same. Why executive? Because the one who make decision only based on the executive, right? The one who center up decisions stay on them. Whatever the consultant say, whatever your analysis say, whatever the head of officers say in that very single region, the executive have the capacity to decide what this company want in the future. Most likely, people advise and government also advise to go to another option. But this executive will stay and stubborn or like what their case. So we justify to punish them because the decisions on their hand. We think this is not justified under the proposals, right? Second, we're going to talk about why this most likely people will repeat the same problem like what our closing government was going to talk, right? Because this company and also the investor also demand company to have the faster return, to have the faster investment to back, for example, to have the product sell as much as possible within society, right? That's why they force company to create as fast as product. They force company, for example, to do that, right? We think this will always be repeated because this company will see it is still profitable if they'll go to the gambling process, right? Because they think that maybe in the future the return will be fast, and also maybe in the future the return will be lost. We need to add another calculation for them to be more to consider even more, because this calculation will not happen in the proposal. They will always gambling on their case. They will always think that most likely we are going to be benefiting by this decision. In our case, we add more calculation to begin with. But even if they go to excessive risk, they can argue in court, for example. They can argue to the court that they are fine with that decision. We don't think justify under the proposals, right? But the most important thing, we don't limit the capacity of company to have their own profit, but we need to make company more rational in making profit based on the forecast and based on the national's interest, right? Because we don't only company burdened by the decision, but government and also society, right? Because many people are lost their job because of this company. Not only they're our employee, but another company employee, because domino effect created by company also exists. If your bank is failed, another company will also being failed in the end of the day. Another company also will get the harm that you are talking about, right? Moreover, we will contextualize the debate in the free market when all decisions are matter, all the company decisions are matter, no matter you are as developing company, even as developer company, right? Because you need to take good decision. Because when one company, even one country fail, another company also will have the same risk to begin with. We need to prevent this to make company having better calculation, and also we don't want to create more unstable in terms of economy. In the end of the day, we propose.
First, this is motion about policy, not theory. You have to prove that in real life you will achieve your effect, that your goal that you set in the first speech, right? Secondly, please recognize that if you want to have this effect, you have to recognize if there are other ways you can do that, avoiding harms that we proved you on the second bench, and you never ever responded to that. We believe that this policy is hugely inefficient and harmful. It is inefficient because the harm will still happen, and these executives will avoid responsibility. Secondly, it's harmful because it makes responsible people who are not masterminds of this catastrophe. Third, it leads to extreme cost for the state. Third, it harms stability of law and business at all, right? So, before I start to sum up this debate, please have in mind, dear judges, that economists and these CEOs are very smart people. That's why they are CEOs of economically significant companies. And usually, people who know something about economy don't work for prosecution in state persecution because much higher salaries are available in these companies. That's why criminal law regarding economic crimes is hugely inefficient in every country in the world. And what only governments is doing here is causing harm for people who are not responsible for that at all. So, two questions in that debate. One, and we agreed with the government, how to prevent too big to fail effect, right? And Lehman Brothers case in the future. Second, what the harms with that policy and why they are bigger than potential benefits. Yes. So, first, how to prevent too big to fail effects. Actually, first we have to define what's the harm of this too big to fail on Lehman Brothers. The biggest harm is actually that because of these risky decisions, the state should cover any losses that were incurred by other entities and also this company, right? So, like the first thought you have in your mind in that situation, maybe you should not cover the debt and the mistakes of this company, but people who are actually innocent and were deceived by this company, right? But the policy doesn't touch that at all. Secondly, the problem is that actually these companies can't risk when they are taking these specific actions, right? So if the state is actually saying that we will cover your debt because you are too big to lose and only persecute the executive, it's actually no incentive for company to taking this risk, right? It's not incentive for these executives because, as I said you before, there are smart guys who have mindset of costs or risks and benefits, right? So the risk in that situation for executives is pretty low. One, because they will have long and very costly long trial because they have the best lawyers who can defend themselves in any case, and because they don't, like best lawyers in economic criminal law are working for corporations, not for the state prosecution, they have more likely to actually win and be sentenced not guilty. Secondly, even if they are guilty in this criminal case, they will have a prison that is like a hotel, even better than Kapsis hotel, and you will have any kind of harm for you. But what they have on the other side of the benefit side, that we can gain the hugely big benefits because extreme release taken by them was done because of foreseeing a huge monetary benefit they can gain, right? So we have like small risk, big benefits still will happen, right? And they will still do it. Thirdly, we have to understand if there are other ways to actually prevent this too big to fail effect. And we believe there are many, right? But the first stuff is that they propose only incentive. So what they do, they base on the will of people who have bad faith, right? Because they don't care about the rest of society, they don't care about their own profit. So this incentive is not going to do anything with their decision-making process. What we should do in that situation is actually to create a balance of control in prevention way, right? So, for example, most of these companies are operating in stock market. So, what is an inherent feature of stock market is that you control any kind of big transactions have an impact on other stakeholders and other actors in the market, right? Secondly, they require much higher publicity and more information that usually should be confidential. They have to disclose it, and in order to administrative body can stop this action to be taken, right? So what we do, we are stopping their action that can cause the harm. What you do, you allow for a harm into society, and then want to take to responsible people who are actually defended by the best lawyers in their country, right? Closing.
We also assist this company to have the decision, but we think that the decision also inside the company, decision also inside executive hand. So they will share their own executive without consider another factor.
You will not in any kind influence these executives' decisions. I have proved you before. Secondly, you will not in any kind of influence decisions of proxies who, even if there is a case that they will agree to that and they know by any kind of surprise what is going to happen, still they have like benefits and protection from these international companies who are actually in international litigation much more efficient than the state, right? So what we brought you as CG is not as CO is not only about the other ways that we can do it. It's also because this policy is absolutely harmful for all of us, right? First, when it comes to stability and with CG case, right? But actually, the first thing that leads to instability in the economy is that you don't have a stable framework, and stable framework in economy is civil and economic law, right? So what we actually do is saying that we can broke the basic rule of law that we cannot punish you retrospectively. If you've done a legal act before, you cannot be punished further, right? Also, it's very important because if the risk is so vague term, it's very difficult to actually set if the future it will be interpreted other way, right? Secondly, we told you about innocent or wrong proxies that didn't know about the stuff and were manipulated or convinced or forced by these executives to actually be in board of directors, and then even if they were formally responsible, they were not real guys, real masterminds. Thirdly, we told you about innovation, how the leading companies in our system that are making the biggest change in our society will have to stop if we buy your narrative to actually operating in the market and take risks because the risk is inevitable for innovation. And thirdly, we told you about the big cost of money that will be taken by the state to actually compete with them, and big shame because they finally will lose. Thank you very much.